Recently, the TN police unearthed money scam involving a gold loan company. Hundreds of crores of small investor monies had been collected by this company with a promise of a very high return. Similarly, about a year ago, a Vellore-based firm was also in a same spot where thousands of crores was lent by people for the fabulous return that the company had promised. Now, why does this happen time and again? Why do people fall for such false promises and then lose all their life savings in this process? Is there a way in which we can be a little bit more smarter in the way we make decisions? That's really the substance of our video today. But first up, let's look at greed as a principle from a story. Long ago, in the Greek mythology, the story is of a king called Midas. Midas was a king who was obsessed with being rich. He spent countless hours every day going to his granary and going to his jewels, counting them, running his hand through gold coins, pearls, diamonds, and so on and so forth that his treasury, his kingdom's treasury had. He was almost obsessed with it to a point where he didn't attend to court duties but spent more time in being adorned with gold at all points and times. It so happened that in his kingdom, he served a very important person, and that person owed him a favor. In return, he asked King Midas, what did he wish for? And Midas, without a second thought, said he wanted everything that he touched turn into gold. Now, this person who owed Midas a favor asked him to reconsider. He said, my son, I can give you this boon, but it will not be a boon, it will be a curse. So think about it. But Midas, who was obsessed with gold, really didn't think twice. He said, I want only this. The god said, so be it. And therefore, Midas went around his room touching every object. He touched his chair turned to gold. He touched his bed, the bed turned to gold. Everything, he ran around his palace, touching every object and watching with joy as it turned into gold. Right? And he was excited. He did this for a couple of hours till he started tiring. He slowly became very tired. And as he walked into his garden, he wanted to smell the fragrance of the beautiful rose. As he leaned forward and he touched the rose turned gold and there was no fragrance in it. He slowly started realizing the futility of his boon. He was very hungry. Since morning he had been running around. So he came back to the dining table, picked up that lovely looking apple. Before he could bite into it, it turned into gold. So he was left a hungry man. Just then, his daughter ran into the dining table, seeing her father after a long time. She came down and wanted to embrace him. And the moment it happened, she turned into gold and he lost his dear daughter. Now this story, while it's a mythology in Greek, gives you the importance that excessive greed leads to a lot more problems than it gives you a succor. Now this is what is happening, and we have had history of countless financial scams that we have seen in the last 20 plus years, my friend. Starting from the Royapettah benefit fund benefit fund scams where people had put in with a hope. In fact, many of these institutions had existed for long periods of time and people had really come to trust them, and then they went bust, leaving people with nothing at all. So the benefit fund scams in the early part of 2000 and late 1990s to sterling tree magnum, people who invested in vast pieces of land with the promise that there will be planted teak trees which will grow to a certain length over a 20-year period. With the price of teak going up, you will realize a huge benefit on that. So people invested in a host of these, imagining that in 20 years' time, the amount of money that they will realize will really take care of their retirement. Now you had goat schemes, mango scheme, rice scheme, name it, the enough number of schemes have existed, come by, where investors have lost money. So losing money, it seems, is not something new. It's been happening for millennia. What we need to look at is the history of how people lost this. And I have a few of my thoughts which I wanted to share. First up, most of these investments were made into schemes that were untested, unrealized, or were not sure. So typically some of these teak tree or rice schemes remained untested. They were not backed by big names. They were unknown people who were offering these kind of things. When it didn't work out, people ended up losing a lot of money. Second, the rate of return that was promised was quite large. The rate encouraged people or attracted people to make the investment, and therefore one needs to when you get something that looks too good to be true, it's time to pause for a second and think whether it really makes sense. Because not only will you not get the interest, but you will also lose the principal amount in return. So that's really what some of these schemes had. Of course, some of the other institutions which were recognized by public also went down, but they also didn't have a regulator in place. Now, what do I mean by regulator? If you invested in a bank today and something happens to the bank, the RBI, which is the regulator of the bank, will come to your rescue in some form or fashion. Not saying that every time you will get all the money back, but they are available. The banks need to be regulated by them. Similarly, if you lose money in a mutual fund, or if a mutual fund refuses to pay you money, you have the Securities Exchange Board of India, SEBI. The mutual funds are answerable to them. Many of these investors who lost money in these variety of innovative financing schemes were outside the purview of regulation, which means that when you lose money, you have nowhere to go and ask, because they were unregulated finance companies. So one of the things that we need to look at when we are investing is to check who the regulator is, because that's the last stop for you if something happens to your savings and investments. How does one avoid making such mistakes with their investments? First up, awareness is the most important. Most of us, when we make these investments, will be aware that these are subject to high risk. It's extremely important to recognize that you are taking a high risk. Awareness is the first aspect to mitigating the problem. When you know you're taking a high risk, you must be prepared to lose the principal. If in your mind you are prepared with that, then I think that's the first step that you take. Second, how does the loss of this kind of an investment impact you? Many a time we want to get a higher return, and if the value of your portfolio that you are planning to invest into these kind of affairs is say less than 5 or 10%, it may not be a bad idea. Take that risk. Sometimes we need that extra return, but do it with your eyes open. Know the fact that there is no mitigation. You could end up with no money at all at the end of the day. So that's the second. Third, look for the pedigree of that investment. Is there a promoter? Is there somebody you recognize from that who has a pedigree of performance? So if it comes from a big business house, there is likely to be some amount of comfort. If it comes from somebody who is well known in the marketplace or well known for their past performance, then it again makes a lot of sense. So these are all ways you can do a bit of due diligence, not only on the company but also the management, to make sure that you are investing in something with your eyes open. Next, look for constant update on how these investments are progressing. Don't just put it away, fill it, shut it, forget it. Always look for updates on these investments at regular intervals. This is one more way you will know whether you are staying on track or losing out. Like I said, greed is a common emotion. It impacts every human being. There is nobody who's born who says they don't get greedy at all. But knowing that these are all the ways in which you can keep your greed at hand, and hopefully that will lead you to build a portfolio that is reasonably sound and will pay you rich dividends in the long term, is the way one can win at portfolio creation. So as long as your investment in these is not a very large amount, you're still okay. But if you're betting your last pie to this one big risky investment, I'd say God save you.